Have you ever felt like nothing? Like you just don't matter? Like your life just isn't amounting to as much as you thought it was going to, or you haven't done as much for the kingdom as you thought you were going to? Do you feel overlooked? Do you feel bypassed? Do you feel rejected? Do you feel like nothing? Well, I've got good news for you today, because God makes something out of nothing. That's who he is, and it's what he does. And we're going to talk about that today. Hi, Kathy with Radiant Light Ministry here. I'm excited to talk to you about this today. This is just burning in my spirit because I just got this revelation yesterday as I was reading through my daily scriptures, and passages of scripture that I've read so many times, but they just leapt off the pages and started a fire in my spirit. And I'm just like, don't you just love it when that happens? So I'm going to talk to you about Elijah and Elisha. I'm going to throw a few other things in the mix, but I'm going to start with Elijah, and specifically in 1 Kings. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what happened right before this, but we're going to go into chapter 19. But before this, Elijah just got done, prophesying that there was going to be this drought for several years. And then, I hear the sound of an abundance of rain, and you better hurry up before you get caught in it. And God used him to call all the prophets of Baal to Mount Carmel and challenge them to sort of this, duel of sorts, and said, okay, you submit to your God and cry out to him and get him to set fire to your sacrifice, and we'll prove whose God is God. And if he doesn't come through for you, I'm going to show you that my God is going to come through for me and burn up my sacrifice. So you guys go first. And he sat back and he's like, I'll wait, right? So they're cutting themselves, they're screaming, they're chanting, they're dancing, they're doing all the things, right? Trying to get their God to burn up the sacrifice, and all day long. Okay. And Elijah starts making fun of them after a while. So naturally, their God doesn't do anything. And so Elijah finally gets up and says, okay, pour water over my firewood. Just keep pouring water. Dig a trough all around it and everything to catch the extra water. And they filled up the whole trough. That's how much water they dumped on. 3 times he told them to do it. Buckets of water. Okay. So I don't know how is that firewood going to burn? We don't know. We talked about that last time. Pouring water over, a well-watered tree, right? Anyway, so Elijah says, okay, now, God, show these people so that they'll believe that you're real, and, that you are the Lord. And of course, the Lord sent down fire, so much fire that it burned up the entire sacrifice, and it licked up all that says in the scriptures. It licked up all the water that was in the trough. So literally, God showed up in a big way. And all the people were like, oh, the Lord is God. And they were all bowing and everything. And they slaughtered the prophets of Baal, and it was a whole thing. Okay. So after this, in chapter 19, after God used Elijah so mightily, okay, Jezebel, who was the wicked, wicked queen, King Ahab's wife, and she got very, very upset at this news. She sent a message to Elijah saying, I'm going to make sure that you are killed. So imagine if you're sitting in your house and you get this notice that the government is after you, right? So I would imagine, yes, it was very scary. She was the queen of the whole land, okay? And she was saying, I'm going to have you killed. So he became very afraid and he ran. And an angel actually came to where he was in the wilderness and gave him, I love that it says, it gave him cake. The angel gave him cake and water, and said, okay, now let's continue your journey. And he had to actually eat cake twice. I think it was not the kind of cake that we think of, but I still just love that it says cake. So that's my favorite. So he fed him, took care of him. And then the angel said, come on, you got to come to the mountain of the Lord. He went to Mount Horeb. Come away with God. I love that. So in chapter 19 of 1 Kings, we're going to go to verse 9. Okay. So he went to the mountain of God, Mount Horeb. And it says, there he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Literally, God said that. He said, I've been very zealous for the Lord, and I've done all these things. Okay, I'm going to skip past it. But he says, I've done all these things for you, God, and look at how they're coming after me, and I'm the only one left, and I'm in trouble. I'm rejected. I'm being chased after. I'm singled out. So in verse 11, it says, and God said this, and he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. Some translations say a still small voice. And when Elijah heard it, he knew it was God. He wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And that's where I'm going to stop there, because that's the thing that jumped off the page at me. And I'll explain why. Okay, so God showed Elijah two things. And I truly believe that it wasn't just for Elijah. That's why it's in the scriptures here. It was for us. This is a word, picture, object lesson for us. Okay? And so what was he showing him? Okay, first he showed him that there was this raging wind that was tearing mountains, okay, and breaking rocks. And it was doing all of this destruction around him. But God wasn't in that. And then there was an earthquake, and there was fire, and who knows, it could have been a huge pillar of fire like what the Israelites saw, okay, when God was leading them out of Egypt. We don't know. But I would imagine it was probably raging. And God wasn't in that either. And so there were all these things that were screaming around Elijah. And God wasn't in it. There are going to be voices, there probably are right now, screaming in our ears. And God's not in those voices. So that was something that God was trying to teach Elijah. That all of this stuff that's going on around you, all of this fear and confusion and raging and screaming, it's not God. And what did God do? He called him away to the mountain of God. He called him away. Come away with me. Come away with me. And what did Elijah have to do? He had to get still. He had to listen for the voice of God. Because all of this stuff that's raging and screaming in your head, it's not God. It's the still small voice. It's the low whisper. How are you going to... Do you ever notice when somebody talks to you in a whisper, if somebody's like, talking to you, you're like, you lean in. You cup your ear, you got to listen. Because it's tough to hear a whisper sometimes if we don't know what to listen for. All of those voices screaming and raging in our ears, it's not God. God is not going to tell you something that is against his word. He's not going to tell you to divorce your husband or your wife because you're sick of them. Because he just won't stop throwing his shoes in the middle of the floor and you keep tripping over him. God's not going to say, well, you just had enough. You've done so much for him. You just need to leave him. God's not going to say that. He's not. That voice that's screaming in your head, that's not God. He's not going to tell you to break someone's heart, to destroy someone else, to say something that's going to damage someone. He's not going to tell you to do that. That's not who God is. God's not screaming and raging and yelling in your ear. That's not the voice of the Lord. It's the voice of the enemy. My mother had an issue like that once in her life. She was, it's a long story, but she was supposed to go out with my dad on a date. And they had a babysitter, and she had waited forever to get out of the house, and she hadn't got out of the house much. She was a young mom, and they only had one car. My dad was supposed to come home and take her out. She's all dressed, all ready to go. And my dad came home, and he went right next door to talk to my Uncle George. And they sat out on the front porch, and they just talked and drank beers for hours. And she got so angry. And this voice just kept screaming in her head, screaming over and over and over. I'm sick of this. I'm done with this. I'm better off without him. And she kept hearing it screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming over and over and over in her head. And she had rehearsed it over and over and over. Okay. So why was that voice screaming in her head? Was that really her? Was that God? Tell someone that you'd be better off without him? God had told her originally, be extra, extra, extra kind to him when he came home. And that made her even more mad. Because she's like, why should I be a doormat? Why should I tell him, he should be coming and apologizing. He should get down on his knees and give me flowers and all the raging, all the screaming. But when she submitted to God and said, God, I'm just going to say this. I know my flesh. I can say, yes, God, I'll say the holy thing. I'll be kind, but this is going to come flying out of my mouth. And that's when God said, okay, but is it true? And she realized whose voice she was really listening to, because God's voice was that still, small, low whisper in the back of her mind. Is it true? She was like, oh, no. And when my dad came in the door finally, he looked terrified. And my mom said to him, oh, honey, I love you. And here, take your coat off and I'll get you something to drink and, whatever. And she just took care of him. And he fell into her arms and wept and said, oh, I thought that you were going to be so angry with me. My father went to the war, Vietnam War. And so he saw things and went through things that were so horrible. And he was struggling so bad with them. And he just thought, you know what? I'm just done. I'm just going to go end my life. And this voice was screaming in his head, your wife and your family would be better off without you anyway. That was the very thing that my mom was hearing in her head over and over and over, that she needed to scream at my father. Whose voice was that? Was that the voice of God? That was the voice of Satan. If she had said that, what would that have done to my father? Whose voice are we listening to? Whose voice is it? The still small voice that's in line with this. That's God. And God loved her enough. God saw her. And God loved my father enough. God saw him. They weren't nothing. There's a woman, a widow, that came to Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 4. And she came to him and said, I don't have, my husband, your servant, is dead, and I don't have enough money to pay my debts. My kids are going to be sold into slavery. There's all this stuff that's going on in my life. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't pay the debts. I can't lose my family. Please help me. And Elisha said, go get the last jar of oil that you have and start pouring it into jars. Borrow as many jars as you can and just keep filling. And she's like, okay. She went into her house and she's like, okay, I'm going to pour the oil out of this jar into this jar, and then I'll just have this jar. Right? But she poured the oil, and there was more in the jar. So she grabbed another jar and she filled that jar. And she grabbed another jar and she filled that jar. And she said, give me more jars, quick, 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 quick. And her kids brought her more jars and more jars and more jars until finally she said, give me more jars. And they said, that's it. We don't have, there's no more. And the oil stopped flowing. And Elisha said, okay, take those, sell them, pay off your debts, and live off the excess. And she did. Because God made something out of nothing. We're talking about that God. We're talking about a God who made 5 loaves and 2 fish multiply so much. A little kid's lunch fed more than 5,000 people because there was 5,000 men, but there was also women and children, and they estimate there's upwards of 10,000 people there. And they had baskets left over. And every time they reached into an empty basket, they pulled out fish and bread. Something out of nothing. Jesus said to one of his disciples, oh, we got to pay our taxes. Okay, go get a fish. There's a coin in his mouth. That's our God. He paid his taxes from a coin out of a fish's mouth. Impossible. Impossible. Lazarus rose from the grave. Jesus called him out after 4 days stinking in the grave. He was dead. But God does the impossible. He makes something out of nothing. He spoke our entire earth into creation out of nothing. The great lights in the sky, the sun and the moon and the stars. He spoke them into existence and he placed them there. Right? The trees and the animals, and he spoke them into existence. They weren't, then they were. Our God makes something out of nothing. If you feel like nothing today, if there's a voice screaming in your head that you've been bypassed too many times, you've been overlooked, you've been rejected, you're nothing, your life is nothing, know that. Hear me today that that is not the voice of God. That is the voice of the enemy. That is the voice of Satan talking to you. Because is it screaming? Is it raging? Is it over and over and over repetitively telling you, okay, there's your sign. There's your indication. That's not God. Sit down, get quiet, read the scripture, talk to him, cry out to him, because his voice is the still, small, low whisper that says, I love you so much that I sent my son to shed his blood for you. I traded his life for you. That's how much value you have. Jesus came and said, yes, crucify me, humiliate me, beat me, drag me down a street, put a cross on my back, nail me to it, stab me in the side. Why? Because of the joy set before me. What's the joy? You, me. You are that precious. You are that loved. Read through these scriptures and see God's heart for you. He gave everything just to be with you because he loves you so much. You are seen. You are known. You are loved. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. That's God's plans for you. He has plans. He has dreams for your life. God has dreams for your life. You're not overlooked or bypassed by God. We serve a God that makes something out of nothing. He says he makes everything beautiful in his time. He has a beautiful plan for you and your life. God bless you. I'll see you next time.